books super consistently, because I'm a generous reader. Like, my average rating on Goodreads is like a 4 point something, you know, I'm like generally smashing that 5 stars, because I love books, but, so I don't have like actual like numeric rankings for these. I don't think that I could, because in the scope of everything I've ever read, I think it's hard to put into context, but I did want to go with like what I was, books that left something to be desired, to books that were like chef's kiss. And so the book that I think left most to be desired, which I was disappointed about for sure, was this Claire Keegan novella, So Late in the Day. I read Small Things Like These last year, the end of last year, and I really loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was so beautiful. And I still think this book is very beautiful, So Late in the Day. It is also, you know, like a scant, maybe 100 pages with like pretty large text, so it's a quick read, but I just didn't like the story line, the plot. It revolves around a man, and he's just like, you're kind of watching him have a shitty day, and then as the day goes on, you're kind of like learning why his day is shitty. That feels like a reduction of this book a lot, but it is also like nearly 100 pages. I don't want to like give too much away, but basically, I don't even think, like, I understood what was going on, like, maybe 50 pages in. So he's having a shitty day because his fiance recently left him, and basically he's like reflecting on their relationship together. Like, this day was supposed to be their wedding day or something, I can't really remember. But honestly, the reason I didn't enjoy it half as much as Small Things Like These is I'm just really tired of reading stories of men being so terrible to women, and this book is just that, especially in the ways of like not recognizing the labor that women put in, and then being surprised when women are unhappy, you know, not like taking women's labor for granted, and then being surprised that they need more, or that, like, I don't know, that women have needs. And that kind of is where this book landed for me. It just made me sad. If a man had written this book, I would have just like thrown it out the window, which maybe is unfair. But it just also felt like it was way too short to just leave it at that, to like leave it at like, wow, the woman that he was about to marry, who he thought was his perfect fiance, like, had needs. Shocking. And so and like, wow, now he's alone because she left because she had needs and he wasn't meeting them, you know, like, I don't know. To me it was just like, okay, next. But that being said, I mean, Claire Keegan's writing is beautiful. It's really evocative. It really brings you into the room with the characters. So like, for that, a fantastic read, but the storyline was just tired in my opinion. The next book is the book I most recently finished. That, like, I'll be real, So Late in the Day was my only kind of like book. The next book that I have is This Is How You Lose the Time War, by Amal Almodar and Max Gladstone. Oh my god. My only reason this book kind of falls lower in the ranking is because I kind of want to read it again. Like, reading this book is like reading a 200-page riddle, you know? Like, interspersed by action between red and blue, or enemy operatives. Did I say that? Though they begin this correspondence and then suddenly kind of realize that they have more in common than they think, and develop a love of sorts. And then in between each letter, you're like seeing each of them alone in the like universe that they inhabit. Does that make sense? And there were quotes in this book that just like haunted me. Oh god, one of the ones was like she was talking about how poetry ossifies like trees. Oh, here I found it. Even poetry, which breaks language into meaning, poetry ossifies in time the way trees do. What's supple, whippling, soft, and fresh grows hard, grows armor. Isn't that? It blows my fucking mind. I think that that's amazing. I think that that's such a cool idea. Anyway, so there was just a lot of shit. A lot of stuff in it that like, stuff is a vague word. There was a lot of, let me run the sentence back. It's clearly like not coming out of my brain the way I want it to. This book had so much amazing writing, amazing thought. Like, it felt like being inside of someone else's brain a little bit. And I don't really know what it left to be desired. It left something to be desired for me. And I think it's like that I'm just an earth sign and I want to understand. I'm an earth sign with a Gemini Venus. Like, I want to understand. I want to like simmer it down, like get all the facts and like be able that we see, you know, being fat, being obese as being unhealthy, when that's not a good determinant of health at all. And I feel like it's a bit hard to get into like the ideology in the book because it goes against a lot of dominant narratives, like right now when I'm talking about it, because it goes against a lot of dominant narratives we have in society about bodies and about fat people and about the way our bodies should be. But basically she goes through a lot of studies that have shown that fat people and obese people are not more unhealthy, and that there's data that shows both things. But of course, like, people make money, people can profit off of telling people to lose weight, and you can't really profit off of telling people their body is okay as it is. And so that research and data has been much more pushed out into the mainstream, because of like age-old tropes, because of racism, and the way that black people's bodies specifically were perceived and have been perceived. Anyway, so yeah, I would highly, highly, highly recommend this to truly everyone, frankly. I think it also portrayed something that I had never known, that dieting is apparently really bad for your health, like yo-yo dieting, but also like all sorts of dieting, changing the way and restricting especially, is really, really bad for your metabolism, for your hormones, for like every part of your health, in addition to the fact that like most people after like 5 or so years like are gaining weight back. So even if dieting was helping people lose weight at like a cost to their health, it actually isn't. So people are just deteriorating your health. You're deteriorating your health. Anyway, as I said, like, a lot of things that are really complicated that I'm trying to sum up in a short form here for you in this book. And I think if you are curious about what I'm saying, if it doesn't feel true to you, or if you're like, that's not what I've heard, whatever, like, read this book. It's really interesting. And I don't know, it just made me so conscious of also the ways in which, like, in TV shows that I like, in all sorts of things, like, fat people are often the butt of the joke, and it's like not even questioned, in the way that like there used to be, I feel like, so many more like racist jokes in shows. Like if you watch anything from like 2010s, and like there still are, like, don't get me wrong, but like if you watch anything from like the early aughts or like the 2010s, this new poem, there's this kind of like a little bit, just like a teensy bit like sad or sinister kind of like undertone of like what's happening. You know, is she safe at her home before? You know, it's not clear. And you come to know the family that she lives with, the couple that she lives with, and start to see their love for her and her love for them, and watch her kind of start to like emotionally grow out of her shell, you know, and start to come alive. But at the end of the book, she has to return to her family before school starts. So over the summer, this book takes place. And I don't want to like say too much about it, honestly, because it's so beautiful and it made me cry so hard. And I think, like, you know, I could tell you the plot of it and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's sad or whatever, but I just also think that like the way Claire Keegan writes is so, like, she just captures the little like tiny micro movements of people, of place, and so then like you're sobbing and you just like can't even really put a finger on why. Like, it's not like, oh, one thing happened and it's really sad. It's like, oh, all of these small bits are coming together to like just touch the like kind of humanity in this story. I mean, this book was a masterpiece in my opinion. Like really truly stunning. I don't know, I can't remember if I like highlighted anything. Oh, I did. Anyway, yeah, this book is ridiculously good. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I would highly recommend it. I would highly recommend, even just living back there, I'm like, I'm about to cry. It was very, very good. Okay, and my last book is the longest and the first one I read this year. I mentioned it, I think. This is The Three People's Village by Sim Kern. So this is a novel that takes place in 2020, but it takes place in a kind of alternate reality where Gore won the election of 2000, and as opposed to George W. And instead of going to going into the war on terror like we did, like the US did, they have like they begin the war on the climate, and so basically they're like, everything is centered around reducing climate change, like back in 2000. So coming to 2020, the year 2020 where the book takes place, they're in a much different place than we are now with climate change. And so the novel centers around a like girl in her mid-20s. What's her name? Maddie, yeah. And she's in her mid-20s. She's a teacher in Texas. She lives in this like pretty quickly gentrifying neighborhood. She's like a young white woman. And she doesn't live in this neighborhood, but she like teaches in this neighborhood that's like mostly students of color, and mostly people of color in the neighborhood, but then like a bunch of like young white hipsters are like coming and moving in, and her boyfriend is one of those. He owns this like old like warehouse where they like put on kind of like punk shows every weekend, and she's like in a punk band with him and a couple other like centers around, how do I like tell the plot of it without giving it away? The action of the novel revolves around the fact that they are planning on tearing down what they call the lab. This is this warehouse where they throw these like punk shows. And so they're planning on tearing down the lab to build like new hyperway, a new highway through this neighborhood that's primarily people of color. And though the war on climate has taken place, like a lot of things are still run on fossil fuels, and the highway that they're planning to build is going to have like an oil pipeline through it, and you know, it's going to displace all these people who've lived in this neighborhood for years and years and years, you know, for generations. And so she initially, the main character initially begins like advocating for this like Save the Ninth, which is I think the neighborhood is called the Ninth Ward, and she is like, how can we protect the lab? But then is like kind of having a moment. Like, I thought this book really expertly shows kind of like becoming radicalized as like a young white person, and I don't know, maybe we don't need more representation of that. That's probably a fair criticism, but I do think like it was like, I don't know, it was cool. Trying to explain the plot, basically she gets involved in organizing, but kind of with this self-serving idea of like, we want to save the lab, we want to save this warehouse where we like put on these shows and this arts hub that we've created and whatever, without really realizing the greater context of like understanding, you know, mass incarceration, understanding like gentrifying, and like the racism that's really blatantly at play in this community, like against this community. And so like you're walking with her kind of as she's starting to understand that, and as they begin this movement to save this building that's important to them, but also like the neighborhood as a whole, and it becomes a much larger movement. And in it, there's also like, it has a queer love story, and her kind of like coming to terms with her identity, and just some like really amazing friendships, and like lots of things that I was learning in reading it. Basically, really great book. And I think what it so expertly does is also show that like, you know, so much of the system in the US is built around systemic and like violent carceral racism, and that even if you have a president who like changes so that like, you know, like in 2000 we started like focusing more on climate change, like the systemic racism is still so entrenched in our society that like basically this takes place along a very parallel timeline to the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, notably like the George Floyd occupied zone, is that what it was called, in Minneapolis, and like the Jazz in Seattle, or the Job, and those places where people were like not only protesting and organizing, but also educating and creating like community care with one another. And so I think what it shows so beautifully is that like that reckoning needed to happen then and still needs to continue to happen now. And also in this alternate reality where one thing was different, you know, like climate change was taken care of a little bit, that would still be a necessity to fight for, you know, equality and anti-racism, and but sometimes I'll like sit and stare at my bookshelf and be like, I'm never gonna read all these books, and I just keep buying more. Like, this is just a fraught cycle. But yeah, I'm feeling really good on the road too. On the road to finishing all my books. Not saying that I'm not gonna buy more books. I definitely will, but I'm trying to hold off for just a little bit. I wanted to show you the book that I started yesterday because January is not quite over yet, and I don't believe that I will finish this book tomorrow. So I'm not adding it to my January books. But this is, I guess, my TBR because I've begun to read it. I'm not certain that I'm gonna finish it. Like, I might DNF it. I'm inspired by Haley Jean to DNF more frequently. DNF early, DNF often. But this is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I've heard it likened to Gossip Girl, and honestly, reading the first 2 chapters, yeah, it's very similar. It reminds me a lot of reading that when I was a young tween. But I just needed something like a little like lighter and sillier and more careless, like more carefree than what I've been reading this month. Because, you know, we just finished the 5 darkest weeks of the year, the 10 darkest weeks of the year. We're like on the other side of that, but it's been a heavy season, so I wanted to read something that would just like make me kind of dissociate